Today on the Failing Up podcast, we are joined by Joseph Bramwood, the Director of Growth for the Huffaker Group, a real estate expansion team. Together, they'll delve into the theme of learning from failure, discussing the importance of embracing failure as a means of growth, and the challenges of navigating setbacks in both personal and professional journeys. Joseph shares insights in highlighting the significance of humility, willingness to learn, and the adaptability in achieving success amidst failures. Let's jump in.
Welcome back to Season 2 of the Failing Up podcast, Humble Lessons in Life and Business. My name's David Huffaker. I'm the owner and operator of a couple of real estate companies here based out of Nashville, Tennessee. We operate throughout the entire southeast and I guess eastern half of the country. I'm here with my amazing co-host, Bethany Voice. Bethany, welcome.
I'm so excited. Season 2, I got invited back.
You got invited back. I know. You didn't get
excited.
kicked off.
I know. Just surprising.
It is surprising.
We'll see what happens in Season 3.
Season 3.
It's like Survivor.
That's right.
It
Yeah.
is, right?
No,
So
my torch is
where
going
are
to get
the
put out.
torches?
There's 3 at the table now. Joseph, try to make it through.
Yeah.
I've already got an
Somebody-
alliance.
Somebody's
so
got to be
it's
back.
I
fine.
got an alliance.
Yeah.
Here with our good friend, Joseph. Joseph, take a minute, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, and what makes you so amazing.
Yeah, so many things. But my name is Joseph Bramwood. I am the Director of Growth for the Huffaker Group, real estate expansion team with Keller Williams Realty. Been in real estate for, I think, 7 years now, somewhere in there, and been in a lot of different roles and loved every minute of it.
You started when you were 12?
11 actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. My first...
It was a bike route and a Century card.
Yes, that was it. My first convention that I went to, everybody made fun of me because I couldn't go out to a bar or anything. I had to stay back while they all went and had fun.
Yeah.
So it was great.
It's a horrible environment.
It was
No, yeah,
terrible.
no.
Nobody
worst,
should be
man.
making
Yeah.
fun of anyone.
It's way more fun now. Now I get why people go. So.
Yeah.
It
You're finally
makes
21.
makes
I'm so
Bethany much
excited.
more tolerable.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that what you're
right.
saying?
It's much
Right.
easier to go to the classes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, so you are younger in terms of like leadership, especially but I forget because you're so good at what you do, right? And kudos to you for the success that you've had and your ability to impact agents. Tell us about your journey. How did you start? What role did you start in? And how did you end up as the Director of Expansion?
Yeah, I mean, I came from fast food restaurant management, and I actually loved it. I had a blast running around a drive-through, and just realized there was a ceiling of achievement there. I really begged at Keller Williams Market Center to hire me. They tried to tell me no, and I wouldn't let them, but I got to start out as their agent services director, and
Nice.
it was the best thing that ever happened.
What restaurant or what fast food chain?
It was chicken. It was Bojangles.
Gotcha.
So
I was going to guess Chick-fil-A.
Yeah,
All right.
Chick-fil-A would have been a blast. They said no. And I wanted off on Sundays.
But you also started, and because I love this story, and David, I don't even think you know this, but I heard about Joseph long before we actually hired him. And it came from like, you got to meet this guy. He's this superstar. I've never seen a harder worker, someone who's more intentional about where they are and where they want to go. And you started in fast food like pretty young and
Yeah.
then saw even a growth path in your teenage years, right?
Yeah, I mean, the day I turned 18, I was promoted to be a salary manager, so which was super fun. And I had asked to be promoted. It was just in their policies they couldn't before you turn 18. It was a stupid rule. But
Rules.
before then,
Yeah.
Before then, I was ordering trucks and running shifts and doing all these things. And I really was so fortunate to be around people that let me do that.
Yeah.
And allowed me to kind of grow in those roles. And it taught me so much and definitely failed a lot through it, especially as a young manager leader. There were lots of personalities to work
Right.
through in those moments. But
absolutely.
lots of growth there for sure. And I got to come into Keller Williams and be their agent services director for a few years and grew into a partnership with a productivity coach. Got to help grow their program. Also got my real estate license, got to sell some houses here and there, which through that path, met Bethany and got to come on as the expansion director for the Huffaker Group.
Yeah, I know Bethany came to me and said, I know this amazing young man that we need to get into business with, and yet we were looking, where's the opportunity? I think it's the coolest thing about the KW ecosystem is that as you, we're a field of talent, and then yet as you discover talent, doors tend to open up, which I think is the coolest thing Gary built was this massive organization where anybody that wants to succeed probably has a path. That tends to get bottlenecked in some spots, right?
Sure.
And we're even experiencing that some within our own companies of when you have talent, like I've got 3 interviews this week with talented people and you go like, where do you put them? Because you guys are so good at what you do. And so Joseph, walk us through a little bit when you think of failure, right? When you think of your journey so far, what do you think of? What does that mean to you when we talk about failure?
Yeah, I mean, I feel so fortunate to have been so much of my career in an environment where failure was promoted and really looked as a way for you to learn and grow. And yet you hear that over and over again. It's still a challenge to really accept that, though. It still can sometimes be a struggle in the moment. I really think of failure in how do I respond to those moments. It's definitely a spot on the journey, not the destination. And it really can always help you to learn and grow and be the catalyst for your next change or growth or whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah, I'll say Bethany and I, for a while before we started Level 8, Bethany was our director of expansion, right, and did a great job at that. And yet we talked about the opportunity that sometimes maybe somebody can do the role better than us, right? And I think that it speaks to your ability to find talent. Bethany, you did this full time for a living, right? Finding talent, still do that. But then you went out and found talent in Joseph, who now goes out and does this. Where do you see agents as they're newer to the business or people who are building teams inside our organization, outside? Where do you see them making the biggest failures? Where do you guys come across where if you could tell all of these people out here that are, maybe earlier in their career than we are, what advice do you give them? Where do you see them making mistakes that you can maybe navigate or wire around for them?
You're gonna let me go?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like people are always the opportunity, always the solution, always the problem is something we say a lot, right? I mean, people are the way that you grow. And yet it can be challenging, especially to have someone to learn that failure is just a part of the process. And you want to get it right every single time. That's the mindset you go in with, and yet you don't. So how do you respond to that? Are you clear with people around you that we're going to fail through this together? I think that's why I've been super lucky to get to work with Bethany. That's always been the answer. Like, yep, we're not always going to get it right. How are we going to respond to that? How are we going to learn from it? And how are we going to move forward? I think is a mindset shift we all have to have in this industry as we grow.
So you get a lot of people coming into the industry with solutions or pre-planned ideas, and yet, a lot of them don't make it, right? High failure rate in this industry.
Yeah, for sure.
The thing I love that I think we've kind of said as the mantra of growing people, especially in organizations, is not what you get, it's who you become.
Yeah.
And yet people come with programming, right? They come with baggage. They come with preconceived ideas. They come with ego. They come with all of these things. You've done a great job of finding talent and retaining talent, right? People who have stayed with us and gotten into production have been very successful. What do you see in them that maybe some other people might be lacking that you see come and go out of the business?
I mean, I think a willingness, I think ego is a big word in that, a willingness to be able to learn, to grow, and to rewire, right? I think there are some super talented people that just don't have a passion for that piece of it. And I think you have to be willing to say, I'm going to throw my hands up. I'm just going to trust the process and go. I think that's what we're looking for a lot in talent interactions. Again, we get it wrong sometimes. But I think that is a key ingredient to success in this business, that you have to set your expectations as good as you can, right? It can be a shock to the system when you come in, and it's hard.
I'm sure that with anything in life, right, there's this willingness to trust the system. In our industry, it's a challenge because a lot of people are fairly entrepreneurial, right, or independent contractors, which comes with a ton of flexibility. It's why people get into this line of work, right? It provides immense flexibility, and yet success leaves clues, right? We say that you have to be comfortable in the boredom of success, which doesn't line up with I want flexibility, right? Like consistency and strategic activities do not line up with, I want flexibility in my life. Yeah. I think that's where we kind of see that breakdown. One thing I've learned just in watching you guys in your ability to grow people and find talent is that I maybe always think about ego as, you need to check ego at the door. And yet I've learned over the last 18 months, again, watching a lot of what you two do with people, ego is actually a pretty good thing. It's in certain areas, right?
100%.
Like we all have an ego. So to say that we got to check it or that's not going to be there is probably foolish of me. So now I'm trying to look at it and go, can you be humble and hungry in certain areas, right? Yeah. And then we actually find the most talented salespeople do kind of put this cape on, right? And they like to stand out there with their chest held high. That ego is actually helpful in terms of confidence and success in doing the activities, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think confidence for sure is something that you have to find. I think we all find it a little bit differently. Sometimes it takes some practice. Sometimes you just a little bit of fake it till you make it, right? Go in. And I do think this industry, I mean, we're asking people to trust us with the largest financial decision of their lives typically. It's got to be some ego in that. You've got to be able to look up and think that you're the right one for them to do that. So I think it does come a little bit with the territory, and it is required in the right doses for sure.
Yeah, especially client facing, right? For real estate agents, we believe we are the solution to a lot of the, not really even just the sell of the home, but that we can be a resource for people when they're going through a divorce, or we can give them wisdom when they're buying their first home or second home from a financial standpoint of what's a sound decision. That's the joy of our business, right? It's the community we get to be in and those people we get to serve. And then watching, right? The thing that I love in real estate is that, knock on wood, it's pretty predictable, right? So we have this confidence to kind of go like, it really doesn't matter what decision you make, because ultimately if you buy or sell real estate, you're going to become more wealthy over time. Right, long enough time period, we all look like we knew what we were talking about. I've learned that if I just do it long enough, then I don't look as stupid. So tell us a little bit about maybe a time over the last few years or in your journey here at the Huffaker Group where you have failed and that seemed like the end of the road, and yet you're able to kind of reflect back on it a year or two later and go, well, now I kind of see maybe God had me go through this challenge or through this hard part of my life because it made me a bit, or maybe you've seen it in some of your agents. Where do you see that show up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a tough question. I think there's a lot that I can look back on. I do think of when I started at Keller Williams that the role I applied for I didn't get. And in that moment, again, going back to ego, because I felt like I had really done a lot already in a short time. And I was like, how would they not pick me? And they also, like you said early on, right, they found a different role that made a lot of sense for me at the time. In the moment, it felt like a failure. And it took some ego checking in that moment. I'm super grateful that the person hiring me on the other end was much smarter and wiser than I was and was able to kind of spin it in true leader fashion and show me that it was the right thing at the right time. And so I look back on that and I think, thank goodness I just trusted the process and was like, I'll try it, whatever. And it worked out. And best decision I ever made. But in the moment, again, I think we can change our mindset around how we respond to failure. I don't know how much control we have over that initial reaction or emotion.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah, we've talked about that, right? Like, you can't control the first thought and can't control the second.
And Joseph, you're so interesting, and we've been talking a lot about the balance between the humility and the ego, and I think it really is this confidence piece you're looking for in the business, but it also has to be balanced by humility. I have been so honored to be able to work closely with you in the last year or so. And David, to your point, like, you always want to hire people who could do the job 10 times better than you. And Joseph is absolutely an example of that. And I've noticed, I know for me, humility showed up with age, right? It showed up with a lot of life experience that kind of checked the ego for me and was like, hey, maybe you're not as amazing as you think you are. Maybe it's time to just be a learner and absorb what other people have to say. For you, you are so young. We joke all the time. Joseph is like my son that I introduce in meetings.
You're my great aunt.
I'm his great grandma. And yet humility has just been like this natural piece. Like, you have this really quiet confidence that says, hey, trust me with your business, trust me with these decisions. And that humility is always there. Where do you think that comes from without all the life experience? Like, if I could go back and have that at your age, I just would be so envious of that. So where does it come from for you?
Yeah, thank you for that, man. I think that's a huge compliment and one I'm not sure I deserve. And yet I do think that age doesn't necessarily equal life experiences. I think I've definitely had enough there. Looking back on how you become who you are definitely goes back to when you were a kid, right, with your parents. I came from separated parents. They were divorced for as long as I can remember. And I think something about living in two different environments consistently, going back and forth, they were very different on opposite ends of the spectrum, and I think it taught me a lot on how to interact with people in different environments and be flexible in that. I think that comes with humility and confidence because you're not always going to get that right. You're going to mess up through that, and it honestly taught me so much about how to just come into different spaces and roles and really just grow with others and be excited about it. I don't know if that exactly answers the question. I don't really know. I think that there's been a lot that I've experienced. I think just having the willingness to really listen to those around you and to acknowledge that you're not going to be the smartest in the room and you probably don't want to be. Yeah. So how do you go and find the people? That's how I got here. I knew that I wanted to be around people that were going to take me to that next level. I couldn't go there on my own.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah, I think you have this ability to relate to people, and you're very goal driven, right? You're very goal oriented, which we love, right? Because we love to be able to set up targets and focus on it.
Yeah.
And yet the secret sauce for you has been your ability to do it with care and compassion for the humans that we get to get in business with, and really caring about the outcome of their success, right? And so I think it's really cool. I do think that not always wisdom comes with age. I told somebody yesterday, it's like, I don't think I got wiser. I think I just got tired. I just ran out of energy to be stupid. Right? Like I was laughing about Morgan Wallen throwing a chair off the roof the other night in Nashville, and I'm like, yeah, it sounds very similar to something I wouldn't say I would do, but maybe my younger self, something stupid. And I'm like, I didn't actually get any smarter. I just got tired earlier in the day. Like I just don't have the energy to do those things.
Yeah, who has the energy to throw a chair off the rooftop anymore?
I probably do, but I don't feel like it.
Right. You just, And so I think with that, you've been a great display of what's possible when someone sets their goals, because I didn't have the wherewithal at your age. And I do think a lot of it comes from... like you said, us having similar backgrounds, growing up in separate houses and things like that, you do learn to lean on yourself and believe in yourself and kind of have that confidence of like, I've got to control this situation no matter what. And we see that showing up in your agents as businesses as you bring them in and get them growth. Where do you see failure currently for us right now, right? Just kind of off the side, but you guys have perfected a model of finding talent and bringing them in, and yet where have we failed as a company in seeing that through, right? You get them through what you guys do a boot camp, and then all of a sudden, where do we drop the ball? Where do we screw up right now?
I mean, I'd love to think that
we can't say anybody's name.
Yeah,
no, I'm kidding. Right. David is where we messed up. No, I would say that love to think it was perfected. I think it's definitely something we're always growing. I think it always goes back to expectations set, right? Really identifying early on. We are super clear that our environment is not for everybody. So there is being goal oriented. You just want to go out and find as many talented people and just let them in the door and just see what happens. I do think as I've grown in the role, just kind of pausing and realizing I want to set people up for success. I do care about the outcome. I want them to be where they want to be, and it may or may not be with us. So I think I have failed personally in just pushing people through and saying, let's just do it. Let's just see what happens versus pausing and thinking, is this what's best for everybody involved?
Yeah.
I think that's shown up for me.
Yeah. I think in the growth, right, we're in these growth roles, and it is so hard. You want to bat 100 or 1,000. This is me and all my baseball analogies. Super good at
One of
them.
those numbers that are really high.
You want to get all the touchdowns and the goals. But I think it's so hard because the reality is humans are where we mess it all up, right? Like everything else in our business is a number, and then there's human error, and that's us, and that's emotions, and it's the moment. And I think it's so disappointing because I know you care. I care too. I still take anytime we can't deliver on the promise, or anytime it doesn't work out, or someone leaves our organization, or potentially we decide to get out of business with them. I mean, I lose sleep over those people every single night.
Sure.
And the reality is, though, how we show up in the environment of the growth process, where we're in the interviews and the KPAs, and I think has helped us get really clear on who we want. And yet in those rooms, I think everyone is talking about what we hope to happen. And then the reality of doing the work is where I think it all falls apart sometimes. And for us included, right? Like I have the highest expectations of how I show up every single day and how Joseph will show up and how our whole organization, and we're going to mess it up and we're going to have a bad day. And the agents are the same way. And that, to me, you just can't control. And so it's just getting clearer and clearer on what's expected, and then hoping that they understand that, and then hope that we can show up and play all in with them every single day, so that when they're ready to play all in, and they do, that's where the magic happens, right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people listening to this probably are, we have a good bit of real estate agents, people who are building teams, and transparently want to say that, you know, someone said to me the other day, if you get in business with 3 people, one of them is likely to have a life moment that's going to derail them, right? We all just have life having things that are outside of our control, right? Parents get sick, or, you know, somebody, something happens somewhere, positive and negative, right? Life happens. So one of them probably has a life moment. One of them probably isn't willing to do what's necessary in order to be successful. And that's what we say a lot. Like non-talent sounds a lot like talent. And so people will tell you things that you believe they are the one or capable of it. And yet the audio and the video just don't line up when it comes to actually doing the work. And so, you know, we look at that and go, all right, well then 1 out of 3, maybe 1 out of 4 actually end up becoming who they want to be, or executing on the plays in the way that they're intended to be executed on in order to have success.
Yeah.
And in this industry, there is almost a 90% fallout rate every 2 to 3 years, right? So there's this turnover of people coming and going in the industry. I say all that to it makes me feel better because I feel like I'm not the worst ever. But if you're listening and you're building teams or you're building companies, that is a natural evolution. It's why leads, listings, and leverage. Coach Tony used to say, you figure out how to generate the leads, right? Through either loving on your database or some marketing plan, prospecting, things like that. The listing piece of it, meaning being able to convert people from the kitchen table to a sign in the yard, or from the coffee shop to the closing table, being able to walk people through that process. You learn that, right? Those two are somewhat static. The leverage piece of it, right? Systems, tools, and people are always evolving, right? And so it's always our chance. And that's what I love about our company at Level 8.
Yeah.
You now have a multitude of teams, which gives you insight into how people react in different environments. And we've learned from that at the Huffaker Group, right? Being able to look at Level 8 and go, man, how cool is it that you've found talent for some of these other teams? And I mean, they're just crushing it within 60 days. And then other times we look up and we go, well, why does this team over here continue to just churn through? And you go like, well, the talent's not vastly different, right? And so you recognize the environment. What have y'all learned through that?
I mean, I do think it goes back to, someone can be talented and just not a right fit for the environment. I think, like Bethany said, going back to getting super clear on the, expectations, what can we learn from any relationship, any business relationship we go into or out of. It truly is always evolving. And I think for those of us that are high achievers, goal-oriented, maybe a little bit of control freaks or perfectionists, I think that's challenging to hear, and to just accept. So I think it's just as much on the responsibility of the team owners and team leaders to look up and say, I've got to take ownership that we're not going to get this right 100% of the time. How can I find that out quicker so that everyone involved gets to wherever they want to be faster?
Well, have a metric, right? Have something as a business owner that you're tracking in terms of what is your retention. At one point, you went back and researched that 9 out of 10 people fell out of the industry, but when it was a few years ago, you said if you joined the Huffaker Group, 9 out of 10 of them were still in the business 2 years later, and so it was the exact opposite. And I don't know if that's still the number, but knowing those metrics of just know that you're, it's almost like if your business is up 10% and the market's up 10%, well, you didn't really do anything, right? You're just riding the wave. But knowing if your business is up in comparison to the market, so knowing where you're at as far as retention and talent. Are you creating the environment? If you're creating a world where people are constantly coming and going, you have to stop and evaluate that it's probably not them. Right? If you've had 17 fiancés and none of them ended up marrying you, we might want to look at the common denominator here, right?
I do think it's hard with people too to not be reactionary. You go into these, it is people, it's emotions, and it's hard when someone leaves or doesn't work out to not immediately just want to change everything because you just have this immediate reaction. I do think, even going back to the conversation around failure, we're going to have an immediate response. And yet, how do we pause and just look at it objectively, through the lens of numbers?
That is true leadership. I was talking to Roger Sargent this morning about it. And I was like, you have to have a high enough EQ, right? A high enough emotional intelligence to be able to not, because there is some pain associated with it, right? And you can have this knee-jerk reaction and shut down in order to defend, right? In order to save yourself of the pain. Or you can go okay, this is painful. Where's my DNA in this, right? What could I change? What could we do different? And what is their DNA in this, right? And it's okay, right? People are on. Sarah Reynolds and I were talking a few weeks ago, and I said, if our goal is to be the developer of people, right? If we're leaders and we want to make people become their best version of themselves, and we look up 20 years from now and all of our people are still with us, that's a problem, right? I didn't actually accomplish my goal of helping people grow to their very best, because there's no way, I'd have to be pretty egotistical myself to think that all that's going to happen here. And so I think you have to just be comfortable with the fact that if you're going to develop humans and people, you're going to grow some of them beyond your ecosystem, just because what we're running into now, most of my seats for talent are filled, right? You guys do a phenomenal job, and I want to be in business with you guys forever, which means that other people are going to probably have to grow beyond, or we're going to have to create new seats somehow, which we've always racking our brain on.
Right. Yeah. I think I tell we have a growth department meeting, so those who are listening and are in the leverage piece, I mean, this is the one thing I hear from the Level 8 side of talking to teams of the frustration. It's the growth. It's the people. it is such a low barrier of entry. I think Joseph and I can tell you we're not the smartest people. I can speak for myself. Joseph, you can chime in.
Pretty smart.
And yet it is the daily, like I've never been more challenged with the emotional grind of like, you will hear no more than anybody else in the industry. Yeah. People will leave you. People will, you're in the emotion of the hard stuff with people. And so we really have decided as a growth team, and when I'm coaching people around leverage, is that we're going to view that as an amazing opportunity. We get to be the most disciplined, the like character development people in the industry, because although we didn't have to go get a PhD in growth, we do every day get to play on this field of just really high grit, mental grit. And so what an awesome opportunity to develop ourselves and those around us through that. And so we kind of repeat that to each other every day, maybe a little bit just to encourage each other through the day,
Sure.
Especially when someone's having a hard week, because it is just high rejection. It's high emotional warfare at times where you've really got to keep calm and be able to constantly look in the mirror and reevaluate and then move forward and say, despite that, I'm going to go impact people. And so for those listening, it can be so frustrating, which I think is why people want to shy away from it instead of diving into it, right?
Yeah, that constant pain and rejection. I think that we talk about the journey, though, right? And who you become along the way.
Yeah.
Right? We said earlier, it's not what you get, it's who you become. And you go like, who you guys are becoming and the way that you're able to show up in other facets of life. Because it's like, if you can show up every day and spar at this level, day in and day out, you become such a warrior for other places in your life, right? I think that's really cool to watch.
Yeah.
All right, I want to be respectful of your time. Joseph, I know we've got wrapping up here. Think about 2,000 years from now at the end, right? As young as you
Long
are.
time.
Yeah, he has way longer than any of us do at this table.
Yeah.
But think about what are some possible regrets that you are worried you may run into at the end, right? If you're looking back on life, what are those things that could possibly pop up and cause you stress in the future that you maybe missed?
Yeah, I mean, I think my word of the year was to be present. I think I am definitely one who struggles to disconnect, right? And to really focus on the people around me as far as family goes. I love them and I'm there, and yet am I really present in the moment, or am I thinking about something else? I think that constant worry, I'm definitely goal-oriented, which means I always want the next thing. That can be a challenge, and I think I already have regrets that I've missed out on moments because I was too focused on the next thing and not being content with where I was. What is it?
Yeah.
Hindsight's 2020, hindsight's 2020. You're looking back, you're like, that was a great time. Like, I loved that. It was so much fun. There was so much failure, and yet it was a blast. And I wish I felt that more in the moment. I'm sure that will be one of my regrets 2,000 years from now.
Yeah, and I think that's probably everybody, right? I think especially, a lot of us these days, high functioning anxiety, and because when we're not living in the moment, right? When you're always thinking about the next thing, right? That's what creates that anxiety. Yeah. And I always think about that, the phrase of, anxiety comes from trying to solve tomorrow's problems with today's skills, right? And being present. And I will say, like, there's never going to be, I could look back and say, man, I didn't spend enough time in the moment, or I wasn't present enough. And even if I spent every moment perfectly, I still would, you're still going to wish you had more time, right? You're still going to wish that you had done some things different. And yet, I've also found for those listening, for me personally, there's this thought that somehow we have to detach from life in order to be present in what we're doing at a really high level. And yet I do think you can blend those two together. So for instance, I have my children listen to a lot of my conversations, right? Rather than stepping out of the room or walking away from them in order to do what's necessary in running businesses. I've been amazed at how much business acumen they've picked up over the last 6, 7, 8 years as we've practiced that, right? And they've just, I went and picked up my sons and a couple of their buddies from school yesterday, right? And I was on our leadership call, and they just know, right? Like, they just hop in the car and everybody just listens, but they're listening to the conversations that we're having. And yes, maybe I should be present in those moments where I'm picking them up from school, but I also think I'm still getting to spend time with them. I'm still getting, and they're learning something along, and it's not all the time, right? But being able to kind of balance that. So you're doing a phenomenal job, man. You're obviously accomplishing great things and able to balance a lot. So kudos to you. Thanks for being a part of the organization and all you do for our agents and our people, and for making Bethany better. I know that's a tough
job.
Yeah,
it's a lot of work.
Thanks for joining us today, brother.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.